Hey there! I'm Sarah A. Chrisman, the author of The Tales of Chetzemoka, and today I'm going to talk to you about yellow journalism, which was the Victorian term for what now gets called fake news.
In Sparks Press, Book 7 of The Tales of Chetzemoka, our reporter friend Felix Halloway finally gets so tired of his editor turning Felix's honest reporting into fake news that Felix strikes out on his own and starts his own magazine. As Felix had reflected at the circus in Victoria in A Trip and a Tumble, quote, "As finite mortal creatures, human beings can only ever tell any story by being very selective about what they include and what they omit. This selection gives storytellers and reporters an enormous amount of power. So much so that Felix sometimes found himself frightened by the huge responsibility which rested with his profession. Other men didn't seem to care about this. Far from worrying about which of the many truths in a situation was most relevant to the story, they slung around whatever half-truths and outright falsehoods would suit the highest bidders' agendas and yield the greatest profits with the smallest investment of effort. A reporter's duty to the narratives he told weighed on Felix, though." Unquote. With this attitude, it was only a matter of time before Felix took editorial control of his work into his own hands and started printing his own material. One of the most famous lines in modern times about how easily a manipulation of facts can lead to a manipulation of events can be traced back to the media mogul William Randolph Hearst. In the late 1890s, when an illustrator he'd sent to Cuba for war pictures to be printed in the New York Journal telegraphed Hearst that there was no war in Cuba, Hearst telegraphed back, "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." There's been a lot of debate over the years over exactly how much responsibility for the Spanish-American War rested in the hands of the media and how they spun things.
This is Henny Penny. She's named after a particularly famous shouter of fake news. The Henny Penny or Chicken Little story has a lot in common with Aesop's Boy Who Cried Wolf, and the chicken story comes to us through the Scandinavian tradition. And by the Victorian era, it was absolutely a staple that got... it was in children's school books, actually, and it was used as a reading lesson and as a lesson in be careful about how you spread news. Now, in Henny Penny's case, it's kind of an ironic name because she's one of our calmest chickens.
The Henny Penny story begins when an acorn falls from a tree and hits Henny Penny on the head. In some versions of the story, it hits Chicken Little, who runs to tell Henny Penny about it. But it's basically the same story. Convinced that something unprecedented is happening, Henny Penny rushes to tell all her friends in the poultry yard that the sky is falling and they must go to tell the king. The other birds all trust Henny Penny, so of course they believe her when she tells them the sky is falling. While they're all en route to tell the king, they meet a sly fox who says he knows a shorter way to the palace. He then leads the feathered friends to his own den where he gobbles them all up. From this story, the phrase "the sky is falling" has become proverbial for fake news or for situations where overreacting leads to bad consequences. If Henny Penny had stopped to question whether an acorn really was so very novel, she might have realized that the barnyard had survived many falling acorns in the past. And she and her friends might not have fallen prey to a fox. Which brings us to some good advice for evaluating information in general. Number 1. Use common sense. Don't make Henny Penny's mistake. Number 2. Look for the spin. Every story has one, and it can dramatically affect how information is received. News doesn't have to be fake to be spun in a way that completely changes people's reactions to it. For example, if I told you that lately I'd been repeatedly attacked by predators and showed you my wounds, you'd react very differently than if I told you we just adopted 2 adorable little kittens and showed them to you. Bear in mind, this is exactly the same story. The first spin, about predator attacks, elicits fear from the audience. The second spin, about adorable kittens, elicits joy and possible envy. If I told you we just got some barn kittens and they're still learning the difference between an ankle and a scratching post, that's the same story again, but with a funny spin this time. Media organizations generally only buy pieces that are spun to fit in with their branding of that particular media organization. They've built up an audience that likes a particular spin on things, and they make money by feeding them more of the same spin. Just like McDonald's is unlikely to start selling caviar on toast points anytime soon, a media organization that goes in for hyperbolic spins on their stories isn't going to buy or publish level-headed stories, no matter how accurate or well-written they are. In fact, chances are that accuracy and good writing are exactly the reasons hyperbolic media organizations turn down pieces, as Felix discovers in Sparks Press, and it's our Paladin reporter's disgust with his if it bleeds it leads editor that makes Felix strike out on his own and start printing his own magazine. There's a scene in Sparks Press before Felix leaves the paper where the other journalists are literally cutting and pasting articles out of other newspapers and passing them along to their own paper's press operator. This sort of plagiarism is far from moral, but it was so common by the late 19th century that magazines printed jokes and editorial cartoons about the practice. Advances in technology only made it easier, and today's cut-and-paste journalists don't even have to get sticky glue on their hands. Sometimes, to make their theft less obvious, or to make the piece fit in with the spin of their organization, they'll change various details, and they don't always check back with the original source to verify that the piece is still accurate after they've changed it. Now, this leads to a journalistic situation which resembles the game of telephone, where the story quickly snowballs completely out of control. Which brings me to my last piece of advice today. Be aware that games of telephone can and frequently do happen in the media. Don't take hyperbole at face value. Fake news, past and present, is a huge topic, and of course a short video like this can barely scratch the surface. Within that limitation, I hope I've given you some food for thought, and I hope you'll read Sparks Press to learn the story of how our reporter friend Felix Holloway broke out of the world of yellow journalism and started using his writing powers to make the world a better place.
Thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up, and remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!